everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we're going to be talking to Karen Brailsford about her book, Sacred Landscapes of the Soul, Aligning with the Divine Wherever You Are. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you so very much. It's good to be here, CJ.
So tell me a little bit about the book and when you talk about the sacred landscapes of the soul, let's dive in. What does it mean? What are the sacred landscapes of the soul? What does this mean? It sounds so enticing.
I'm glad it sounds enticing. That was
Yeah.
that was the intention. The framework of the book, which consists of 111 passages, is that I've divided the landscapes of the soul, meaning those emotional places, those spiritual places where we might enter different points in our life, different stages in our life, even different um, points in a day. And
Hmm.
so these landscapes are where we are anchored. So, for instance, there's the landscape of the forest where we're feeling confused and caught up in everything that's happening around us. And so I take the reader on a journey through 9 different landscapes.
Okay.
The forest is the opening one. There's one called the garden, in which we feel creative. We feel as if something's about to spring forth.
Hmm.
There's the landscape of the ocean, where we feel this sense of oneness with all of nature, with life, with the divine. So the idea is that in any given moment, we might be rooted or anchored in a particular emotional state.
Right. Okay, so we've listed three. Would you mind listing all seven just out of curiosity?
All 9, sure.
Okay.
There is the forest,
Mm-hmm.
the plateau,
Mm-hmm.
the tundra. And I think just hearing those words, you kind of, something is evoked. The idea of plateau being stagnant, the idea of the tundra feeling frozen, the
Mm-hmm.
valley where we're seeking peace or solace. There's the riverbank where we're ready to jump in. We see the idea, something calling us forth. We're at the river's edge and not quite sure if we want to step in. There's the
Mm-hmm.
garden, which I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the ocean. Again,
Mm-hmm.
the mountaintop is where we feel this sense of awe and that we have a bird's eye view of what's happened in our lives and what's happening. We're not caught up in the details and the day-to-day living, but we're looking from a bird's eye view and we're seeing, this is what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then vastness is where we are completely surrendered. We have this sense of expanse, of expansion, and that we are one with all of life.
Beautiful. And then how did you, were these, when you came up with these nine different landscapes, how did you come up with them? Were they based on your own personal journeys to these landscapes and how you felt, or how did you come up with them?
Exactly, exactly. I love the idea of diving into nature. I did play around with different ways of organizing the pieces in the book. And believe it or not, it took a really long time to come up with these landscapes.
Yeah.
I was hoping I could just go like and
Yeah.
have the organizational
Channel
framework.
it down to me, God.
It's a come to me framework. But I still have the notes and the pieces of paper in which I was playing with the idea. I played with the ideas of light and different systems of organizing. And once I
Hmm.
seized on the idea of landscapes, I just it really felt right. I'd written a piece called Sacred Landscapes um,
Mm.
of the Soul. And so there is that signature piece within the book. So the idea of nature, I think everyone connects to. The idea of these geographical places that are much more than geography. They're not earthbound. They are indeed, these are metaphors for where we are.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so you started off your life as a journalist. How do you think it helped you to your current role as a spiritual therapist and in even actually writing the book and trying to kind of cultivate that sensorial kind of feeling of being in these different landscapes?
Hmm. I think it's one and the same, actually. The same activity that went into writing uh, these words and bringing it forth is the same activity that I would engage in when I would sit in front of a subject I was interviewing, a
Mm,
celebrity. Because basically, what I was doing, I realized, was I was being a practitioner, a spiritual practitioner. I was holding
mm,
space for the interviewee, I was listening to them, I was discerning what they said, I was giving them the space to mine their lives, especially when I worked at People Magazine, because then the conversation really would be a journey in
mm,
terms of understanding who they were, where they came from, their parents, all of those details would go into a profile. So I always felt that I was being a practitioner of sorts when I was
mm.
sitting with these subjects. And
That's
so
cool.
I find that's happening now in every area of my life. That's consistently what I'm doing. I'm basically holding space. And it's the idea of like, it's really exciting to see this through line. So, in so many ways, I've been doing the same thing that I'm doing now as a writer, as an author, in which I am, I would hold the space to allow these pieces to come through me. I would
Mm,
be in a meditative state. Sometimes, under my covers in bed with my iPhone, uh, writing these pieces. It's funny, one of the ministers at Agape, which is my spiritual center here in Los Angeles, I remember years ago she said to me, "Oh, I just imagine you sitting at your desk and, and these pieces, writing these pieces." And I had to laugh because I knew that more often than not, I'm in bed, prone, and then the pieces would come, and I would just have my iPhone. And I love composing on the iPhone, which I know some people think it's kind of crazy, but I love composing in notes
wow.
in the iPhone. So the stream would just come through.
Yeah, I love your creative process. So it was very much like, so when you were doing these landscapes, I kind of had this vision of you, just like your friend who's like, "Oh, I imagine you on your, sitting at your desk." I imagine you in the forest, just kind of like home, like going in the forest and connecting. But really, were you in, taking a shower and like, "Oh, this is what's like being in the forest," and then blow drying your hair and writing on your iPhone?
That's more like it because I think once you open up to that creative flow, it
Hmm.
strikes wherever. And so and I would play a game with the pieces too, because sometimes the pieces themselves would come and I would just start writing. And then I'd be trying to think, what is the epigraph going to be and what's the affirmation? And sometimes the universe would play a little game with me. And so randomly I would happen to come across a post and there'd be the perfect epigraph for that piece. Sometimes the title would come first. So I love the fact that spirit, the divine, keeps us on our toes, always, always flowing. And you and I were talking about that before
Yeah.
we actually tuned in, the idea of being in the flow.
What is the epigraph? Tell us a little bit about. I'm sorry for my ignorance about. I'm sure
Oh,
this
that's
is
okay.
something I should have learned in
It
English class.
well, it's funny because I would call them quotations, and someone corrected me and said, "They're not quotations; they're actually epigraphs." So those are the quotations that are each attached to the pieces. So I am quoting spiritual leaders and truth sayers and seers and writers, romantic poetry, folks like Whitman, and then
Mm,
Thomas More, and then I think at one point I quote um, um, all kinds of folks, not just
right,
necessarily spiritual writers, and
right.
so they're the introduction to the each piece.
Ah, okay, got it. And then there's a
Peak speak, yes.
peak
Instead of
speak. What
that's
is
my
it?
term, the term that I coined for affirmations.
Okay, TM. Sorry, I just TM.
I should probably put that in there. But yeah, that is my phrase.
Yeah.
No one else can use it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there are affirmations that you actually have. So
Mhm.
if I am in, I would say that where are we right now? I feel like we're trying to get to a vastness, but we're also we're just in the plateau or the forest right now as a nation.
You're probably, I think a lot of people feel that way, but I think it's
Yeah.
possible. I mean, I think that the point of the book is that no matter where you are, spirit meets you where you are. And no matter where you are, you can align with this sense of knowing that all is well, that you
Mm,
can align with this sense of, okay, I'm going to be okay, wherever you are. And so, and I think that's true now with regards to
mm,
what's happening in this country. I know that it looks pretty dire. It looks pretty insurmountable for a lot of people. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering happening, and I believe that even in the midst of the sorrow, there are, as I write in the book, hallelujahs in the hurricanes.
okay, I
That
want to talk about that in the next segment. Because people are like, hallelujahs in the hurricane, ferocity and fire. Like, I don't know what else could be. It's like nice adjectives next to like awful things that are happening.
has,
But we're going to talk in the next segment about how we can actually then apply some of these ideas of using some of these landscapes as a way to navigate the crazy world in which we live in. We've
mm,
been talking to Karen Brailsford about her book, Sacred Landscapes of the Soul, Aligning with the Divine Wherever You Are. So, in the second segment, we'll talk more about that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
thank you.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.